The History Things podcast is brought to you by TR Historical, your one-stop shop for all your historical fan gear needs. Visit trhistorical.com and use the promo code HISTORYTHINGS to receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show.
Are you ready?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the History Things podcast. Happy November. Really excited to get back into the show. I'm going to introduce my main man sitting right across from me as always. You know this man. You have grown to absolutely love this man. It might be unrequited. Who knows?
I don't know.
But ladies and gentlemen, park ranger, author, and historian, Matt Borders. Matty B, how are you, big guy?
I'm doing good, Pat. It's tired towards the end of season.
Dude,
you know how
we're
that goes.
slogging at this point. Do you have unrequited love for our guests or an audience, or do you love them? You love them.
You know that.
Yes, you love, you hate, you love. Yeah, like Matt said, it has been a slog this year. We've been having a lot of fun, but it has been a wild summer, and things are slowly starting to chill for us.
A little bit.
We will get into all of that during our year-end review, which at this point is only a few weeks away. You know, we can start saying things in terms of weeks instead of months. But we got a really cool story to get into today, and I'm going to bring back our guest. I guess I'll introduce our guest before we get into the story. But Dana Schoaf, my main man, the managing editor of print for HistoryNet, the editor of Civil War Times Magazine, has once again graced us with his presence here in the War Department studio. Dana, how are you, my guy?
I'm doing really well, and I'm really glad to be back here. Every time I come, well, the second time I've been here, I just enjoy looking at all the cool stuff you have down here.
There's a ton of random stuff in here.
Yeah, it's very, very rando and very neat, and I like it.
Thanks. I feel like it reflects our weird personalities. So a lot's been happening for us. Obviously, you are our guest. You know, we will focus on ourselves at a later date. But how have things been since you joined us earlier this year when we talked about Erastus B. Tyler? How have things been at HistoryNet and Civil War Times? I mean, you had some controversy there.
Oh, are you talking about the 4th Texas stuff?
You want to talk about that? You want to give us a rundown on how
sure.
you've been?
I'll give you a rundown.
I know you like to attack things head on, big guy.
Well, I went and did a lot of videos for Civil War Times on our Facebook page of the 4th Texas Living History,
right,
put on by the Liberty Rifles and assorted groups and 1st Section Artillery Battery. And that was the anniversary weekend of the Battle of Antietam. I think it was... Gosh, it seems like forever ago, but that was the 17th. I think it was the actual anniversary day.
Yeah,
that's the type of year we're having. Yep. That does feel like it was forever ago.
Yeah.
It was a month ago.
And it was a crazy living history. I mean, they had 200-some guys forming the 4th Texas, which was slightly more than the regiment had at the battle. So it was really interesting to see what would have been a full-scale infantry regiment in the field.
Yeah.
And they had this awesome 3-gun mixed Confederate battery of iron and bronze guns. Really impressive stuff. But I asked one of the guys about the slave background, the enslavement background of the 4th Texas. What was it like from the county from which they came?
Was he prepared for your question, or was he like deer in the headlights with it?
No, he was prepared. And to their credit, I believe, the Liberty Rifles, asked some of their members, because not everyone can be prepared, but they had some people prepared to answer questions like that. And so they referred me to this fellow who's somewhat of a friend of mine named Tyler Greco is his name. You can see the video. And he unfortunately got the numbers wrong because he's busy. I asked him in the middle of a drill.
Right.
But it didn't change the fact that between 1850 and 60 in this county that these guys came from primarily, the slave population grew like 600%.
Wow.
And so, they had a lot of vested interest in enslavement there.
Right.
And so he answered the question, and, I asked it objectively. Well, it could have been like there were like hardly any slaves. I didn't know. And but a lot of people were upset about it. A lot of people thought it was a good question to ask, but a lot of people got upset because, I was bringing enslavement into a living history, blah, 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 blah. And it's like...
Well, why are we fighting the war? I mean, why do we have to keep this issue separate from the material culture?
There's some reason these guys walked from Texas to Maryland, and there's some motivation there. And there's a lot of motivations that would have got them there. But, it
was the states' rights, right, guys?
One of the motivations was they were defending a slave system. And there's, some of the guys, a good number of the officers in the regiment owned slaves. So, I mean... We could spend the entire show on this, and I got attacked because, my ancestor didn't own slaves. He had nothing to do with slavery, and it's like, that's been so disproven. But what really upset me the most was, like, these other reenactors, like, this is no place to ask that question. And it's like, you better wake up, because...
They honestly should know better.
They should know better.
Yeah, at this point, it's been a decade in the making now, at minimum.
These questions are going to be asked, whether I ask it or the general public... And I've been at events where I haven't been involved in the conversation. I've heard members of the public ask, I've heard them ask federal reenactors. I heard a guy ask federal reenactors at Harper's Ferry, how did Union soldiers get along with black people?
And that's a fair question.
It's a fair question. And in many cases, the answer is not very well. They didn't treat them very well.
Right.
They did not treat them very well at all. And it's complex, and it's just like not every Union soldier. In fact, I would say most of them aren't fighting to free the slaves, at least when the war breaks out, right?
I agree with that.
Right.
And, it's to save the Union. But, here's the thing. Anytime, whether you have 3 guys or 300 around a campfire, you better be prepared to handle these questions, because the public sees you as a walking museum.
Absolutely.
Right? You put on those funny clothes. People are going to ask you questions because they've seen news stories about Confederate monuments being torn down or Confederate flag controversies.
Yeah.
And you kind of represent the face of history to them, whether you like it or not.
Or you're qualified or not.
You're qualified or not. So somebody better be able to talk to these people about it, the public, if they ask you these questions, because you're going to get it.
Mm-hmm. The whole thing is frustrating to me because I have both been a professional and a volunteer, on the field in the funny clothes, and I have... also my own life, with a microphone. I have a platform here. Like, I just have my own thoughts on things. And it's like, it kills me the amount of just willful, like, lack of preparation for this moment, I guess you could call it. The amount of living historians who haven't gotten ready for these questions. They just don't want to be asked them. Instead of getting ready for them, they're coming. It's like a tidal wave. Just get ready. But then they're embittered about it. And, like, especially when they come to you, who... you were there on behalf of History Note or the Civil War Times specifically?
I was on for Civil War Times.
So you're there literally to discuss the war, which we never shy away from this moment on our show, which was absolutely fought over the institution of slavery. Now, potentially, like Dana just suggested, it was complicated at the beginning, wasn't necessarily a war of emancipation, but it was always a war about this issue.
Yeah, right.
So, like, how can we just not get prepared to talk about it? Like you said, they walked from Texas for a reason.
Yeah.
And I joked. If you heard me say states' rights, I was absolutely joking.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
no,
sure.
I know you guys know, but there's somebody out there listening who's going to, if they hate me when I say Willie the Deuce, they're going to hate me if I say that.
Well, and it's states' rights to defend what?
Slavery.
I know.
Exactly.
We all know.
Yeah,
Go back and read the secession ordinances. Go back and read them. Read the diaries and letters of these guys that fight for the Confederacy and what they say about slavery. John Henry Hammond, is it John Henry or John Harry Hammond? This was back during the nullification crisis in the 1830s.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
A historian named Drew Gilpin Faust did a study of him. It was in a collection of essays. In the 1830s, this guy's a major slave owner, and he writes and he says, if the federal government tampers with slavery, we will have to fight for our rights, even if it means going to war.
That's where I'm at. So in my modern
world,
world,
that's the 1830s, and he's dead before the Civil War is fought. He dies, but that's what they're saying in the 30s.
That's where I'm at. Is you don't have to listen to modern, like you don't have to listen to Dana's opinion or Matt's opinion or Pat's opinion. Like just read their shit.
Right.
They wrote it down.
Don't listen to my opinion. Look at the slave census records. Understand what's happening with slavery. Maybe a slave state like Virginia is losing its slave population because they're selling them further south.
To the Mississippi Delta.
They're making a lot of money doing
I'm making a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
Are there cobblers in Massachusetts making a lot of money selling shoes to slaves? Yes. It's a United States problem. But the Confederacy breaks away to defend that slave system.
And to expand it.
to expand it.
I will say something.
They break away to keep slavery growing and viable because they've got so much wealth invested in it. That's why.
I will say something controversial here, but I think you guys will kind of follow me for a second when I say this. I'm actually tired of talking about this. The war was about slavery concept, and I will always talk about it because it has to be talked about. But I'm tired of talking about it because it has been so obvious for so damn long that we should be talking about other things in relation to that, like progressing, starting from there and all agreeing. And now we can move the conversation. Like, that's one of the reasons we're stalled in 2022 on this subject, is we're still bitching about this singular was it or wasn't about slavery subject. And we should be so far past that that we should be able to discuss much deeper topics, like how states like Virginia were changing, and not in necessarily always painting things in great lights, but we can have much more substantive conversations on this subject if we just would accept the basic crap. This was about slavery. Stop.
If I ruled the world, I would make every reenactor and living historian read and understand the territorial crises, starting with the Missouri Compromise, 1820.
Yes.
And just I'm going to probably forget some. You got 1820, you've got 1850, you've got Kansas-Nebraska Act, you've got Uncle Tom's Cabin in there, you've got the Dred Scott decision.
Right.
What is the hot button in all those instances?
Yes.
It's slavery, not the humanitarian aspect of slavery. Like, it's bad for Uncle Tom's Cabin, yes, but it's about the North not wanting slavery to expand to the territories and the South wanting it to expand to the territories.
That's why they make the economics argument, because, I get that. And what it really is really rich slave owners don't want to be limited in future profits. But at the heart of all this, we're talking about human beings that they own that are making all these profits.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's effing ridiculous. If you're listening to the History Things podcast and you're one of the people that wants to continue this conversation, just jump off the train, man. At this point, it's about slavery. We want to move past it. So moving past the controversy
now.
That's a good
segue, because trains are involved, train tracks are involved in this story.
So let me ask you before, do you want to go right into the story?
Whatever you want to do.
Or do you want to talk? Was there more than just drama that happened? Well, since we last hung out with you, was there good stuff at work?
There's been a reorganization. I don't know if this is good, but I am now also the editor of American History magazine.
I am the overlord.
So I have two magazines I have to edit now: American History and Civil War Times.
How do you have time to be here today? He's like, I don't. I gotta go. See you guys.
Deuces.
Well, I just assumed the mantle of American history literally last week. So,
okay.
I'm making some, I think, changes. I love what I do, so I'm gonna find time to make it work. I've been doing a lot of videos on Facebook. We're trying to move into Reels and do all that stuff. But I've had a very busy summer, working. And with this sort of the reorganization there, work on my house, which I love to do, my old house.
Yep.
And it's like the weeks fly by. So,
Dude, the slog, right? We said it right at the beginning. It's everybody's just having a good time. Most people are having a good time, but it's just summer's over. We're winding it down.
I know. Yeah. So I've been doing well.
Well, congratulations, by the way, on the new mantle. That's awesome.
Thank you. Those of you that are dog lovers, we lost one of our dogs, which she died way too young of cancer, and that's been sort of a big downer note for us. We
experienced that in-house here with our co-host. Maddie B went through some personal loss as well, so we understand.
Yeah, it's tough, and if you don't have pets, you may not understand, but this dog was like we've had a lot of dogs, my wife and I, and this dog was extraordinary. Yeah. She was so amazing, and we only had her 3 years. We rescued her, and we only had her 3 years, and she got this terrible cancer. So that was really sad. We're still sort of in that rut, I guess.
I can understand that completely, man. Sometimes it doesn't leave you. Well, let's shake the cage.
Okay.
Because I got a big softy heart. I don't want to cry. I know my guy doesn't want to cry.
Right.
I imagine Dana doesn't want to.
I don't want to cry.
You don't want to drive. That'll be the new thing. You drive all the way to the War Department just to cry on our show.
Right.
That was like the thing. I don't dated reference, but for people old enough to remember the movie Jerry Maguire, there was a sportscaster in that show where people would go on, and as they were being interviewed, he would always find a way to make them cry. And I just that'll be our shtick on the History Things podcast. You come up here and I make you weep. So Dana,
let's not do that.
Yeah.
So Dana, on the same day
that
the American Civil War begins to rage across Northern Virginia, along a rail line that we alluded to, somewhere between Adamstown, Maryland, and Point of Rocks, Maryland, a shocking murder is going to take place.
Right.
Tell us the story of Samuel Calvin Lamar.
Okay. Well, let me First of all, to kind of give our listeners may not be familiar with the area.
Okay.
Right. So we're in Carroll County.
Yes.
We're just over the line from Frederick County, basically.
All right, I'm going to beep all this out. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
No, you don't care. Carroll County's fine.
But
we are just literally over the line. It's right on the edge of the town I live in.
Okay.
Yep.
So Frederick County, if you're not familiar, is basically due south of Gettysburg.
Yep.
If you know where Gettysburg is, and like most counties in Maryland, Frederick County goes all the way from the Pennsylvania border to the north, touches Pennsylvania, and then it touches the Potomac River to the south. So it is on basically the border of Virginia. In sort of the south central portion of the county is the town of Frederick. Mm-hmm. That is probably the best known town in Frederick County, Maryland. A beautiful town, historic architecture, really cool place, lots of Civil War history. But south of Frederick, as you head toward the Potomac River, you will encounter a little town called Adamstown, Maryland. And if you keep heading south, you will encounter Pointer Rocks, which Pointer Rocks is a little village right on the Potomac River. If you've ever driven Route 15 out of Frederick, basically the Route 15 bridge crosses the Potomac River at Point of Rocks.
Yeah. So super locally, he's talking where 15 and 340 are the same road and then split.
Yeah.
You're going down that direction towards Virginia.
Yeah. And so I live in Frederick County, Maryland. Nice. And so these are all very familiar areas to me, and I go through those areas all the time. And right where you cross the Potomac River on Route 15, you will cross over railroad tracks. And that is where the B&O Railroad ran, and the tracks are still pretty much in the same location. The Civil War Railroad ran right through there. And also the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. You'll cross over that. Yep. Mm-hmm. And right in that area, there is a spur of the railroad that runs from Pointer Rocks up past through Adamstown to Frederick. Okay? So these are all features that will come and play into this story. I just thought maybe giving people a regional kind of,
paint the picture, Bob Ross.
Paint the picture, right? So this stuff is happening in Frederick County, Maryland. So because I am in the high-paying publishing industry. Good. You got the sarcasm. Good.
So us too, we're in the high-paying park services.
Right. Yeah, so, exactly.
I'm foolish enough to try to collect Civil War stuff, and I don't have a lot because a lot of it's very expensive.
Yeah, I can relate.
You know. But one day I'm perusing these various websites of guys that sell stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and mention this one. It's called Iron Horse Military Antiques. Okay. And the guy that runs it is named Steve McCardle, and he will actually help me a little bit along with this story, as you'll find out. But I was just flipping around, and I saw this thing, and I printed out the heading, and it says, "Statements of 4 men who witnessed murder of a civilian by soldier." Ooh. Point of Rocks, Maryland. And I'm like, whoa, that's close by. Yeah, that's like near where I live. So I started reading these documents and saw the name Adamstown and all these other things that are familiar. So I ended up purchasing them. And I got them home, and I have actually brought them with me. Of course, the listeners can't see them, but I brought them here to show you guys. And
maybe we could take like pictures of these so we can share them with our people. Yeah, cool.
So there's 2 different hands, if you will, handwriting. One more larger, more florid handwriting, and this small, tinier handwriting. Okay, and so I found out. I at least was able to identify who wrote one of the documents. But basically, these documents tell a story about a sad incident which occurs on July 21st, 1861. The same day, the First Battle of Manassas is being waged about 40, 50 miles to the south of Point of Rocks, and the country is really coming apart. There's this mean, nasty little incident along the river between 3 months' troops from a New Hampshire resident and a bunch of civilians that lived in the Adamstown area, a bunch of guys. So let me just that's sort of the heart of it. Let me go back, and I mentioned how I got it. So like I said, there's about 8 to 10 guys on a hand cart, civilians.
Okay.
You know those hand pump carts you see?
Yeah.
Like the old-timey working on the railroad carts.
And there's 8 to 10 somewhere in that area, and it's about 5 to 6 o'clock in the evening. Okay, July 21st. These guys have been in. This is a Sunday, and they've been in Pointer Rocks, and they've been drinking.
Gotta love that post-church drinking, Matt.
And they're cranking their way home on this spur of the B&O.
All right.
That heads up towards their homes in Adamstown.
Do we know what time of day this is?
It's about 5 or 6 o'clock.
All right, so sun's probably starting to go down, or?
Yeah.
Oh wait, it's July.
No,
so no,
July.
not even close.
No, yeah.
Not even close. I forgot
Yeah.
where I am.
Does it count as drinking and driving when
Right,
you're on rails?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe so.
You don't have to do much steering.
Right.
Yeah, you don't. You just gotta
Gas and brakes.
Yeah, pumping up and
Gas
down,
and
up and down, up and down. But
Let's check in with law enforcement and get back to you on that one.
This gets back into another rabbit trail. I mean, people in the 19th century drank a lot more than we do now, right? Even after the temperance reforms. So I don't think it's unusual.
Challenge accepted.
These guys were, drinking on a Sunday, their day off maybe, and cranking their way home for getting supper probably, you know, and they were full of liquor.
They were ready. They were probably hungry.
They were probably hungry. There was no
Taco Bell. Yeah, I was saying, find that 19th century Taco Bell.
No Taco Bell, no French fries to grab real quick. You got to go home.
Samuel Calvin's like, I need a quesadilla.
Yeah. You have to fry up like a pork loin or something. You know?
Wait, we're having too much fun. Somebody's going to hate that. Stop that. Stop that right now.
So anyway, they're heading home, and they run into this clutch or this group of guys from the 1st New Hampshire Volunteer Infantry.
All right.
Okay. So the 1st New Hampshire Volunteer Infantry was there because they were part of a brigade commanded by Colonel Charles P. Stone. Does that name ring a bell?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Stone is going to become a scapegoat for Ball's Bluff
That's right.
in a few months.
The first victim of the
Joint
Committee on
yeah.
the Conduct of the War.
Conduct of the War, that's right.
So he had this scratched-together brigade, and it varies in content, but because units move in and out of it. But at the time, as far as I could tell, it's the 1st New Hampshire, the 9th New York, the 1st Pennsylvania Infantry, elements of a District Columbia Volunteer Company, some cavalry and some artillery battery, and these guys had been kind of scattered from Rockville to Harper's Ferry along the Potomac, keeping an eye on stuff. Crossings, railroad lines, that sort of stuff. That was their job. And so the 1st is, and they're actually in the department, they were the 7th Brigade in the Department of Pennsylvania. Early war organization. Wild put together. It's hard to even find things that, agree who's in what brigade. This is my best estimate.
And you talked about Pennsylvania alone. We got an episode coming up next season where we talk about how Pennsylvania likes to organize and hold on in its own organization of troops. So
yeah,
we're on the front side of all of that insanity. So it's everybody's wild now.
Right. And so, part of these guys were sent down to Pointer Rocks, and they had established the 1st New Hampshire had established Camp Barry, which was named after one of their officers at Pointer Rocks, and that's where they were staying. Now, the 7th will write the 1st will write a regimental history, even though they're a 3-month regiment. They write their own little 3-month regimental history. And
we were in this war too, damn it.
Right, and they call Pointer Rocks a dirty secesh village.
That's not nice, but
Deserved
it.
So Frederick County is like an interesting study of this border state, Maryland, because Frederick City is pretty much pro-union.
Yeah.
It's pretty well accepted in historical record. It's pretty pro-union.
Yep.
You get down along the river, though, and it's very different.
Right.
Just a few miles south, right, of Frederick is these little hamlets, Adamstown, Pointer Rocks,
Poolesville.
Frederick's similar today in that regard.
Yeah.
You get closer to the river and away from the hub of downtown, and things get a little different than they are downtown.
Right.
Well, there was I completely agree with Anna. It's a unionist city, but there was a pretty loud vocal minority. The Markells, for example.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
There was a large, and one of Maryland's largest slave owners lived just south of Frederick.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can't think of her name, but it's on the Monocacy battlefield.
The Vincentiers?
Yeah.
Are they still there at this time?
No.
I would say, because
they sell in 28, but elements of the family are still at the house until at least 30.
So they're around, but their reputation probably still lingers
and she's
around
downtown. I'm suddenly blanking on the first name. Victoire
Victoire.
Yep, Victoire Vincentière. She moves into a townhouse downtown.
We just went and drummed up some very public hatred for this lady posthumously. We presented for Historians on Tap, and one of the stories Matt told, because our shtick was kind of
I saw you did that. That was awesome.
Thank you. It was some of the jacked up local history, and he talked about this family, and he kind of led off with, "I'm going to make you hate these people," and he sold
quite.
it. No, I know, but like he sold it. He was like, "I'm going to tell you about some of the worst people ever," and it was like, cool. This is going to be a sales pitch for like how to hate these people. And by the end of it, man, people were like, "Boo!"
Yeah. Well, isn't it true? She built the slave quarters in front of her house.
She did.
Yeah.
So that she could keep an eye on them. Wasn't that the whole
idea?
idea?
That is the theory, yes.
And you put them closer to the road.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on
go
your
ahead,
toes,
please.
interpreter,
Yeah,
Matt.
It's believed that the enslaved dwellings were built between the road and the overseer's house and far away from the main house, in part so that they can be kept an eye on, and because the home is built somewhat defensively.
Wow.
It's on rising ground.
Yeah.
It is the last structure, with the overseer house being in between the enslaved population and the main house.
Right.
As it's all rising up towards the main.
Right.
And that's likely due to their experiences with the Haitian Revolution.
All right, so pause that, because we have something special coming out for you this Black Friday this year. We're actually going to get you guys to listen to this presentation. I'll just announce it now. Crazy music. We're going to be putting out our Historians on Tap presentation for you all to listen to for those who couldn't make it. So if you want to hear the story, you're the co-host of the show. We talked about this.
I didn't know if it was going to work or not. So
it's going to work.
I'm glad to hear
it's going to work. Matt told a brilliant story about one of the most vile families to come to Frederick County, and as he said, they have tons of experience. So if you wondered why a house being built defensively was a necessary thing for these folk, tune in Friday after Thanksgiving. You're going to find out.
And just to kind of reinforce that, I know the story somewhat. It is an amazing, incredible story that you will find fascinating, and the architecture even of their barn is fascinating.
Yeah.
This house does play a role in the battle.
It does.
During the battle.
Yep.
But
the enslaved dwellings are long gone, though, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and it's crazy, though, the enslaved history of this place.
Yep.
Anyway.
So we're down along the river. We're down in this dirty Secesh town known as Point of Rocks.
There's about 100 people that live in Point of Rocks at the time. Frederick has about 8,000 residents at the time.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of give you a sense of how small Point of Rocks is. But Charles Stone had tried to get served at the St. Cloud Hotel in Point of Rocks, and they kind of turned him away. And so he took over the hotel as a temporary headquarters, kind of just martially took it over.
Is that structure still standing?
No, I had never heard of it before.
I feel like most of the village is gone, the historic
village.
They've
had 1,458 floods down there. So
I'm glad you have the exact number, too.
Yeah. And then then the Shire on the hill up there where all the Hobbit streets and all that is up there.
Mostly what it looks like to me that's in Point of Rocks now are post-Civil War structures, I think.
Yeah. That's why I was wondering if this structure still stood. I didn't know.
And there had been a bridge there before the war. It was already destroyed at this point. It had been destroyed real fast.
Right.
So these New Hampshire guys, one thing to consider is they're from New Hampshire, obviously. They haven't been in the service long. They've come through Frederick where everyone was like, hey, and now they're down along the river where it was like, boo.
Boo.
Right?
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but it's somewhat of a corollary because I didn't serve in Vietnam, but it feels Vietnamish almost to me because they're surrounded, these guys are in camps in sort of protected areas surrounded by a hostile population. Right. They're sort of predisposed to look at all these people down in that area as bad.
Interesting.
And I think that helps.
I could see it.
Cause
some of this problem. So these guys, they're not professional soldiers. They're their uniform is gray. We talk about, right? So this is early in the war. These New Hampshire guys are wearing gray uniforms, gray cappies with a red trim band. They're wearing gray swallowtail coats.
Oh, I mean, those are neat coats.
With red trim.
Yeah, that sounds super sharp.
Yeah, we're in the amateur hour of the American Civil War. That's probably the best way to gauge where you're at. Everybody is amateur until July 21st, 1861, and then they're like, oh, crap, we have to actually train these into professional armies. And that's the whole rest of 1861.
Yeah.
Right.
And part of the winter of early 62. So militia uniforms are everywhere on the field, so I'm not shocked, but that is a neat uniform. Never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't either until I started researching this stuff and actually found a photograph of someone in the 1st New Hampshire, which is unidentified, but it says 1 NHV on his kepi. I don't know his name. I don't know if he was involved in this incident, but the 1st and the 2nd New Hampshire were the same kind of uniforms.
All right, neat.
So, that's to kind of give you some color there. But
all right, so we're in hostile territory. Charlie's in the trees.
Charlie's in the trees, and here comes this handcart coming down the railroad, and they encounter a group of soldiers heading south. Okay, and so the soldiers stop the handcart, and there's words, right, that are spoken between these two groups of people. And I guess I'm going to have to kind of go ahead and, get to the punchline, and then I'm going to read some of these accounts.
Okay.
One full account and some snippets of the others. But essentially what happens is Samuel Calvin Lamar, he's 19 years old. He's on the handcart, and he's lipping off to the New Hampshire guys.
As a liquored-up 19-year-old is wont to do.
A sergeant named Sergeant Samuel Webster says, get off that handcart, because the soldiers want to appropriate it to take it back to Camp Barry at Point Rocks. They don't want to walk anymore.
We want that handcart.
Yeah. Right. All this happening along this spur of the B&O Railroad, and Lamar says, we're not giving it to you. Words get more heated, and Lamar says, shoot and be damned, because Webster's pulled out a pistol and he's waving it around.
Uh-oh.
And so Webster shoots Lamar in the head and kills him.
Oh, no.
Samuel Calvin Lamar falls off the handcart, and by the time he hits the ground, he's dead.
Oh, no.
So, that's what happens.
What do his buddies do?
Well, I think there's a bit of shock that.
I feel like even the federal soldiers not doing the shooting are like, whoa, this escalated real fast.
So what it seems, inferring from what happened here, the shot probably drew attention, right? But all these guys, all these civilians get basically held, right? They hold them, and a Lieutenant William Greeley of Company E takes down the statements of the people involved in this incident. And that's what I purchased
nice.
online.
Very cool.
Were these testimonials from the civilians who witnessed this happening. Now, Webster and all his buddies are in Company B. Samuel Greeley is in Company E.
Right.
And I further theorize that they got someone not in the company,
yeah, so
a little less partial,
remove
perhaps.
Bias,
removed,
thing
right?
like that.
To figure out what happened.
How much times? Words are hard. There it is. I did really well on a few episodes without stammering over myself. It's back.
Were you drinking on a handcart?
I probably am drinking on a handcart right now, actually.
Right.
How much time elapses between the incident and when these statements are taken?
The statements are time stamped 7 p.m.
Same day.
Same day.
Oh, so these should be relatively fresh recollections.
They're very fresh. Yeah, it's like the one. I have one affidavit here that's in the small tiny hand, which Greeley wrote because he signs the back of this and he dates it 7 p.m. Pointer Rocks, Maryland, July 21st, 1861.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So there's no doubt about when that was written.
No, there's no doubt. So, I kind of think as the war goes on, right, and bloodshed's more common, stuff like this probably happens, it's not going to get this much attention, right? No. You know what I mean? But everybody's new. Oh my God!
Right.
We got a dead guy. A soldier shot somebody.
Yeah. Then this wasn't on a battlefield. The guy that got killed wasn't wearing a uniform.
He's a civilian. So,
but he's a dirty secession civilian.
He's a dead dirty secession.
He's a dead dirty secession civilian.
Good people of Pointer Rocks, if you're listening, I did not call your town a dirty secession village.
Neither did we, to be fair.
The author of the 3-month regimental history referred to it as such. So, the first statement I'm going to read is by George C. Brady, spelled Bready. He's 27 years old. He writes it down on his testimonial that he's a farmer and he resides in Adamstown. Okay? And I'll read this to you, okay? We started from Pointer Rocks about 6 this afternoon in a handcar to go to Adamstown. There were about 10 of us. Had gone about 1/2 mile from here when we were met by a party of 2 soldiers and 4 or 5 citizens. The soldier ordered us to stop and take his party to camp. All of our party got off the handcart except Calvin Lamar and myself. So Calvin stays on the handcart. the young man, Samuel Calvin Lamar, who they refer to as Calvin throughout this, okay? One of the
because everybody is named Samuel at this time.
Yeah.
That's true.
One of the soldiers said he was a sergeant. He had 2 stripes on his arm, which maybe means he's a corporal and they're confused. But the records show that the guy was a sergeant.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting.
That I looked at. And we must obey his orders. When the sergeant, ordered us to halt, he drew his pistol and threatened to shoot us if we did not obey him. I told him I was ready to obey him. He threatened us again and leveled his pistol, firing at me and then at Lamar. Lamar said, "Shoot and be damned." The soldier then fired on Lamar, and Lamar fell to the ground. When our men first got off the car, the sergeant threatened to shoot everyone else unless they stopped. After the shooting, the soldiers got on the car, and we went to the camp with them. They cranked it back.
Oh.
Lamar was a farmer and worked for his uncle, Joseph B. Thomas. I am satisfied the sergeant was drunk. Can recognize both of the soldiers. I recognize Charles S. Davis of Company B as one of the soldiers. My party all lived at Adamstown and had been to Point of Rocks on a pleasure excursion and had drank there a number of times. Point of Rocks, Maryland, Sunday, July 21st, 7 o'clock p.m.
Oh. First of all, civilians, so it's not a total group of soldiers. It's only a couple.
And actually, I kind of forgot that until I just read it again. But the main actors on the other side are these soldiers. The other civilians really don't get mentioned again.
Right.
Interesting.
So there's another passenger on a handcart, John Crown, who was a 22-year-old printer living near Adamstown. And he added some more detail. He said that Crown remembered that Lamar said to Webster, quote, "I am not under your orders. Fire away." I remonstrated with Lamar and told him not to say anything. Some of the persons who were on the car started toward Adamstown when the soldiers turned around and bade them to halt. After he had said this, the soldier pointed his pistol at Lamar when Lamar said he was not afraid of him. The soldier then fired, and Lamar fell on the left side of the car. I then said that we must take the car down to camp and get a surgeon when the soldier that shot him said, "Let the son of a bitch die."
Wow.
Crown then concludes his testimonial. Previous to his shooting Lamar, the soldier had pointed his pistol at all of us and pointed at a man named Thomas Hardwood and missed him. So he'd fired at someone already.
Oh.
Missed him before he shot Lamar. The soldier who shot Lamar was drunk. I think that Lamar was drunk also. Okay?
Makes sense. Pleasure excursion and all.
Right. There's one other civilian that has a testimonial named Curtis Wheeler, and I can't find anything out about him. I looked at census records, military records, all sorts of things that you can get to. Maybe if I dig, I'll find out some more, but I couldn't find anything about Curtis Wheeler. But his name is on there unless he gave a fake name, He gives a little more detail. He says, the soldier drew his revolver, upon which Lamar said, "Shoot and be damned." The soldier said, "I do not want to shoot you." There was some talking among the men and boys who were in the car, and the soldier pointed his revolver at one of them, Thomas Harwood. One of the men spoke when the soldier told him to shut up. Harwood went toward the soldier, and the soldier moved his pistol and fired without taking aim at anyone. The ball went into the ground. There was some more talk between Lamar and the soldier when the soldier, and this is Webster, fired at Lamar and he fell. I think the soldier was drunk. Lamar drank during the 2 hours before we soldiers saw the soldiers. 3 times of whiskey and 2 of beer.
Yeah, so he was feeling good.
Yeah,
I should say
well,
so.
What's the liquor before?
Liquor before beer in the clear, beer before liquor, never sicker.
Right. So he drank liquor before beer. So
I mean, he was probably feeling good and on the good side. That's why he was looking for the quesadilla.
Right. I know people are going to get mad because this is not a funny incident. But
I'm actually kind of I don't normally find myself being screw the federal soldiers in most stories. But I mean, on the surface, this guy's just lazy and trying to jack your ride.
Yeah, it was. And so
it's kind of jacked up.
And Wheeler concludes, we all had drunk several times of whiskey and beer before we saw the soldiers. Okay? Now, Charles Brady, who was George Brady's younger brother, Okay, Charles Brady is 27. No, George Brady is 27. We've already heard from him.
Okay.
Excuse me. Charles Brady, we're going to hear from. He's 17.
Tom Brady is only 35. He's only won 2 Super Bowls at this point in 1861.
Yeah.
That one was for my co-host, who's like,
say,
he's like, now I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, I'll let you have that. Yeah. I know who that person is.
You know who Tom. You better know who Tom Brady is.
So Charles Brady, he's younger brother of George. He's 17. He writes, and I'm clipping out of their testimonials, which are all much longer than this, of course. The soldier told Lamar to hold his mouth or he would shoot him. Lamar said, "Shoot and be damned. You can't scare me." The soldier drew his pistol and fired on him. Lamar fell to the ground. I think the soldier that shot Lamar was intoxicated. Another indication that Webster had been drinking. So I had all these civilian accounts, which is cool, right? Was really excited about it. But I didn't have any soldier accounts. They weren't in this packet. And then a year later, okay, I bought these in like 2018-ish. No, wait. I can tell you right now. I think I might have 2019.
I think between Erastus, Tyler, and this story, I think Dana is becoming one of my favorite rabbit hole historians. He's like, this is interesting. Let's find out. Yeah. Boom. Huge story.
So I bought these in September of 2019.
So this is a new project for you. Relatively.
Well, in September of 2020, the guy that runs Iron Horse Military Antiques, Steve McCardle, messages me on Facebook, and he says, "I think there's another one of those testimonials out on an auction site." And I went and looked, and I don't know if you want me to say the auction site or not, but I have it written down.
I mean, dude, why not?
It was Rayner's Historical Collectible Auctions.
All right, so they better send us some money for promoting their show now.
Their auction site. And so I looked, and here it was. I'm like, that's another one of these testimonials, and it says, "Written by Soldier Charles B. Davis." And I'm like, it's a soldier testimonial. And it's a soldier that was mentioned in another account.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm like, again, I'm wealthy.
You're basically like, shut up and take my rich editor money.
I'm just so rich. I'm like, whatever.
Sell one of my 80 cars to get
time to throw some coin at this.
They're Matchbox cars, by the way. We work in the history field.
So I drive home in my Mercedes, and I hop out. No, I don't have a Mercedes, but anyway. So I got it. I bought it because, of course, I had to have it. And so this is what Charles Davis says. And he was in Company B. And I'll read a little bit more of this because it's a soldier account.
Yeah,
right? This is the other
yeah.
side. Okay. So he says, I first thought that these guys on a handcart ran into a picket line or something, right?
Okay.
Like guarding the railroad spur. And that's what I assumed. But when I read this, it became clear to me, no, this was just a bunch of guys heading back from Adamstown, and the soldiers had been drinking too. It's 2 drunk parties of people running into each other on this railroad
People
spur.
being people now.
People being people.
Pretty hard. Oh, God. I love that mantra, except this is a bad story. People die in this one.
I left, so this is Charles Davis's account. I left Adamstown this afternoon and returned to camp in company with Sergeant Webster of Company B and 4 or 5 men belonging to Adamstown. Again, the civilians, I guess, right? Was on my return to camp, this Camp Barry, from picket guard, and I was relieved about 9 o'clock a.m. So he'd been hanging out in Adamstown after he got relieved, right? We walked along till about a quarter mile from the camp when we met a handcar coming toward us on the railroad. One of the men in our company said he would stop the car and that we would go to the camp with it. When up with the car, he ordered it to stop and told the men to get off. They did not get off but moved on with the car. He again ordered them to stop, which they would not do. He then said to Sergeant Webster and myself, "Get on the car and we'll go to camp with it." Now, apparently, this is one of the civilians. They still contrived to move the car when Webster, the sergeant, ordered them to halt. One of them said he wouldn't halt for any northern son of a bitch.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Some bias is coming into this conversation.
That wasn't in the civilian testimony.
Yeah, here we go.
Right. Yeah. The sergeant then ordered them to halt. I got on the car while it was moving and hardly had seated myself when they heard the report of a pistol, looked around, and saw the man Lamar hit the ground. Did not see who fired the pistol. Okay, well,
yeah.
you know,
Who's the sergeant?
This guy,
Yeah.
what's this guy's name? Well, not this guy. What's the dude? Words again. Who's the shooter? Webster?
Samuel Webster.
Webster's like, you guys heard him call me a northern son of a
Right,
bitch,
right,
right?
yeah.
You all turned around, right? And they're like, yes, sir.
And he's like, my back was turned towards the men when the shot went off, and I did not see him fall. So he's like, oh, I wasn't looking. I don't know who had a pistol. Come on, you know. Here we go. We all had drunk a good deal of whiskey during the day. Don't think Webster was drunk.
Because he was a man.
These statements don't go together, right? Don't remember what was said or what took place after the shooting. Think I walked to camp with Webster. Did not speak of the shooting while coming back to camp. The man who first ordered the car to stop is called O.L., illegible, J.O., illegible, was also one of the party who left Adamstown with us. These are civilians, but I can't make it out who they were. So that's the incident that happened. So what's crazy is that the next day, on July 22nd, a Frederick diarist named Jacob Engelbrecht.
Of course.
Oh, we know Jake.
Little Jacob Engelbrecht. If you know anything about the Civil War or Frederick County history,
It's because of him.
Jacob Engelbrecht was a copious diarist, kept massive diaries.
What do we say about him? He'd be the worst neighbor to have, but as historians, we are so grateful for him. I'd be like, get out of my crap, Jake.
Well, Engelbrecht is really the one that said, like, oh, gosh, I can't think of her name, Flag.
Oh, Quantrell.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara Fritchie.
Barbara Fritchie didn't
I
do
gave credit to the real person right away.
because
first.
Engelbrecht
That was
says,
good.
Engelbrecht says, I watched the army pass the entire day. I lived across the road from her. I never saw her face.
Yeah.
She didn't do it.
Yeah.
And he wrote that in his diary at the time. He's like, no, she didn't do it.
No,
Yeah.
we can trust him because the man was literally everywhere.
Right,
Like
he-
that's what I
yeah.
said. Worst nosy neighbor
Nosy-
ever.
right.
But thanks for writing all that stuff
Right.
down, buddy.
Right.
And they have his stuff at the Historical Society of Frederick County, which
Yeah.
is not what it's called anymore.
Heritage Frederick.
Heritage Frederick has
Yeah.
some of his stuff. So Engelbrecht writes in his diary on July 22nd, Calvin Lamar was shot yesterday, Sunday, July 21st, near the Point of Rocks by Samuel Webster of Company B. Like, this guy knows everything, right?
We got to do an episode on it.
He was stationed at the Point of Rocks along the Potomac. His age was 19. So he's talking about Lamar.
Stationed along the Potomac? Is that the word he used? How did he
Yes.
describe him?
He described Samuel Webster.
Oh, I thought you meant Calvin Lamar.
No.
That's why I got confused for a
No.
minute. I was like, wait, that's an interesting
Yeah,
word.
he says Samuel Lamar of Company B, 1st New Hampshire Regiment, which was stationed at the Point of Rocks along the Potomac.
Okay,
And then
okay.
excuse me, he jumps back to
Webster.
Lamar and says he was 19. That's
Right,
who he's
right.
referring
Okay,
to.
so it's
Yeah,
Samuel
yeah.
Webster he's talking about, and then
Yeah.
he jumps back to Lamar.
Right.
Okay, okay.
So I got Webster's service record at the National Archives, and it says he was placed under arrest and detained by civil authority in Frederick City, Maryland since July 22, 1861.
So local cops grabbed him.
Local cops.
It
Yeah,
was
local
me.
cops.
It was the Irish cops.
So-
Copper Frederick.
And we'll get back to all these soldiers here, but jumping fast forward to November, on the 13th of this month, Engelbrecht also writes, Samuel Webster, the 3 months New Hampshire Vols, who shot Calvin Lamar on the 21st of July, 1861 near the Point of Rocks, had his trial yesterday in Frederick County Court and was acquitted.
What?
Got off.
With all those witnesses?
Pro-Union town, I don't know.
Yeah, but a murder's a murder. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like,
The trial lasted all day, and the verdict was rendered about 8 o'clock for the...
he killed a local,
Yeah.
Dana?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay, wow, shocked.
there was a Colonel William Malsby, which that name pops up again and again. A local Potomac Home Brigade, I think, officer.
I believe the third. Yeah.
Yeah, Malsby is
I defer to
Webster's attorney.
Really? He's like, he didn't even fire this gun.
Yeah,
What? Else
So,
how you do it?
what
In fact, Webster didn't even have
Yeah.
a gun.
right. So what happened to these guys? It's kind of interesting if you
Okay.
follow them through the war.
Yeah.
Webster, the murderer. I think he murdered the guy.
I almost asked a jacked up joke. I was going to be like, what did you were saying follow these guys through the war? I was like, well, what did Lamar do? Oh, right. Moving on.
Yeah.
That's
So I
jacked
think Webster. It's a
yeah.
murder.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. I mean, you got to take, obviously, we do have that one soldier say what he says, but we have all these other testimonies that for the small little discrepancies they have, they tell a really consistent narrative.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. The narratives are consistent,
Yeah.
right? There's a little inconsistency. Was Webster drunk? I don't know, but look, everyone says we were all drinking.
I think that's so. To me, the inconsistency is matter of quotation, not in vibe. Right? It sounds like two drunk parties come across each other. One tries to flex their authority because they're wearing a uniform.
Right.
Young kid's a local with a lot of his buddies. Got some liquid courage. Tells him to f off.
Right.
Not literally, but I think we can get that vibe out of this. And then does it matter that he said I'm not afraid of you or shoot and be damned or whatever? Like, I think we get the vibe that he said something smart.
Yeah.
And the guy with the gun
shot him. And I do think he probably said shoot and be damned because several people say
I agree with that too. It shows up in more than one. But either way, something smart was said and the guy shot him.
He didn't deserve to get shot for lipping off like that.
No,
right?
not at all.
And
not at all.
If the soldiers had taken that handcart, that's private property. They're confiscating. They had no right to take the handcart either. Now, as the war goes on, right.
I mean, they flash their badge and I need your vehicle.
Right.
5 seconds.
But so Webster will go on. Of course, the 3-month 1st New Hampshire will muster out in August.
So when you're saying 3 months, are these the original 75,000? Are these Lincoln 75,000 3 months? Okay.
Yeah.
So they didn't sign up in July. These are the original April enlistees towards the end of their initial 3 months.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yes, exactly. They're toward the end.
That's why they're all liquored up because they're burnt out on these weird contracts, and then most of them want to go home, but there's a fight now, and idle soldiers.
Right. And so he re-enlists in the 7th New Hampshire. And that's where I found out he was in his early 20s at this time.
He's got a more complete enlistment.
Yeah, for the 7th New Hampshire. He's 24 when he enlisted in October. And then in October 63, I should say, he transfers to the the 1st New Hampshire Heavy Artillery.
Oh, cool. I love the heavies.
He dies of disease in February 64. He dies.
Does he die on the peninsula with the rest of the heavies, or does he die back in Washington?
I don't know.
When in 64 does he die?
February. That's early.
Yeah, he's not on the peninsula yet, so he probably dies in the garrison.
Yeah.
I wonder. Something to look at.
Yeah. So he dies in February. So Charles Davis, the other soldier, he's from Durham, New Hampshire. He musters out in August as well, and then in October 1861 to June 1862, he is a trooper in the 1st Rhode Island Cavalry.
Huh.
Interesting. Why Rhode Island?
And then he's discharged for disability. But then he will end up again, he's in the U.S. Navy aboard the USS Vandalia as a sailor.
Wow. Why do
jumping all over the place?
And he discharges from the Navy for good in April 65.
So
the war ends.
Serves throughout the war.
Yeah, in various.
Yeah.
He goes from the 1st New Hampshire to the Rhode Island Cavalry Unit, the 1st Rhode Island Cavalry, and from there he joins the United States Navy and he serves on the Vandalia.
He's like, horses suck. Give me a boat.
Yeah.
I want to try that next.
William Greeley, the lieutenant, he's an old guy comparatively. He's 30 in 1861, so he's ancient at the time.
Ancient.
He will leave when the 1st New Hampshire's dissolved. He will actually end up joining the United States regulars. He'll serve in the 11th U.S. Infantry, which I think is interesting, that he goes into a regular regiment. You know?
I guess this Army thing is cool. I want to do it for real.
Yeah, and I don't know. This is way out there, but I wondered, was he like, well, I want to serve, but I want to serve in a regular unit where crazy stuff like this doesn't happen, and it's a real unit? I don't know,
Maybe. I mean, who knows? We'll find out someday, maybe. Maybe we won't.
Maybe we won't. But October 1st, 1864, he's shot in the right eye during the Battle of Peebles Farm, Virginia.
Ugh.
Okay? And the bullet pushes pieces of his skull into his brain. He will survive, but he spends the remainder of the war in hospitals, and he discharges after Appomattox. He marries after the war and raised a family, and he moved to New York City. But in his...
wait, can we rewind? He has a quality of life after this? He gets shot in the eye, fragments in his brain, and lives a life? like non-vegetable life.
It's amazing to me how many of these guys go on they're missing limbs. They go on, marry, and have kids.
Limbs I get,
but
like the getting shot through the eye impacts your brain like 99% of the time. As you said, it does. He's got fragments up in there.
Well, interestingly enough, when I looked at his pension file in the National Archives, like disability pension, it indicated the wound troubled him forever after he got wounded, and he had severe headaches, nerve issues, and sleeplessness constantly.
Oh, just thinking about surviving getting shot in the eye.
And then in January 1879, William Greeley will walk out of his home at 183 West 135th Street, Manhattan, and never returns to his family.
Like just disappears?
Walks out and becomes homeless. You have to think.
Oh, like his brain. His
son, William Greeley Jr., keeps in touch with him. He sees his dad from time to time, but his father never saw his mother again and never came back home.
So they confirm. So he went out and became homeless?
Yeah.
Like literally. Wow.
They never divorced, and the marriage was never annulled, and so she did get a widow's pension.
I wonder if this is, one of those opportunities to study, post-traumatic stress disorder. Not just with physical injury, but he's seen war at this point, right? Like, it's easy right there in this moment to be like, well, obviously you got shot in the eye, something with the brain. But, I mean, what if this is just relative to the fact that normal life, once you've seen all this horror, it can never be that normal again?
Right, yeah.
It's the constant study of this subject.
And, and for decades, we didn't really look at this stuff associated with Civil War guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, look at the SCV and the GAR, and these guys came back, and they were welcomed in society, and they didn't go through what Vietnam vets did and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, they had the same mental trauma as soldiers of any war.
I'll bring up a casual reference. I don't remember exactly where I heard this story, and if you're familiar with it, please reach out to the History Things Podcast at gmail.com. But I vaguely remember reading an account about a federal soldier who was left at a train station in either Ohio or Minnesota and was just an absolute mess, hysterical, crying, screaming, didn't know his name, didn't know where he was from, and people just dropped him off there, and people ignored the guy, and he just was kind of seen at this train station for weeks before somebody figured out who he was, because he was just, as the soldiers, they're broken, and not in they're a broken way, but like the war just kind of cracks you.
Well, I think it's.
No disrespect to anybody out there suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder today. I struggle with how to define what you go through, having never experienced it for myself.
Right.
So that's merely what I'm trying to do right there.
Well, and I think it was Stephen Crane. I'm going to maybe get myself in dangerous territory.
Red Badge of Courage?
The author of the Red Badge of Courage, who talked to veterans before he wrote that book. To try to get realistic descriptions of battle, and I read somewhere Crane wrote every GAR home had the veterans that sat in the corner and just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked and talked until you thought their brains were going to split open and their heads were going to fall off and roll on the floor.
Yeah.
These guys just mentally troubled guys.
It changes you.
Yeah,
it just changes you. So
Greeley ends up dying in 1914.
Wow.
In Waverly, Massachusetts, and he's buried back home in New Hampshire. Crazy.
Whole thing happened in 1914, Matt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A little thing, right?
Just a little.
Tiny little thing?
Well, I was curious do we know when in 1914?
I don't know offhand.
It might not be happening yet. It could be
This is all out of his pension record. This is all out of his William Greeley pension file.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. At the archives, it talks all about this stuff. Now, the guys, the civilians that are mentioned anyway, John Crown is one of the civilians that wrote dictated a testimony to whoever took it down. And there was a federal draft roll done in Frederick County in August 1863 when a draft is instituted, and his name is listed and noted next to it that he is in the rebel army.
Ah.
Bitch.
So I didn't get I couldn't find anything more about him, but it said he's in the rebel army. He was 26 years old in 1863. Okay. Oh no, I did find out. Excuse me, it was the other guy. He joined Elijah White's 35th Battalion, Virginia Cavalry. Right across, the Elijah White, sort of the Jeb Stuart version, a more regional version of.
I was thinking
Mosby.
Yeah,
Mosby.
Exactly.
Excuse me. And White sort of rules Loudoun County. You know, it's strange intermix, and he kind of is independent sometimes, and he's with the Army of Northern Virginia sometimes. And
it's White's Comanches, right?
White's Comanches. Yeah. So
he's trying to figure out what Samuel Means is doing.
Yeah,
actually running Loudoun County.
Yeah, so Crown is captured on September 15th, 1863, in Loudoun County, and he spends the rest of the war at Fort McHenry in Baltimore.
Right on.
So I think that was an officer's prison, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Johnson's Island was an officer's prison. I have not heard that McHenry was specifically an officer's prison.
I actually thought McHenry was sort of like get him in, get him processed, and send him out to other camps.
That's what I thought.
That's
what I thought it was as well.
Yeah. But that's what I read was he's in prison at Fort McHenry. Maybe it was just temporarily, but he takes the oath of allegiance to the U.S. in May '65. The 1870 census has him living in Frederick City working as a printer, which is what he was before the war.
Right.
Charles Brady, also the younger one, right? The younger one, 17-year-old. He will enlist and ride with Elijah White. He goes across the river. And he will become a post-war member of the Alexander Young Camp of the United Confederate Veterans. He dies in Frederick County at age 72. His older brother George, also on a handcart, does not appear to have enlisted. But he will move to Baltimore and work as a railroad conductor until he passes away.
All right.
Thomas Harwood is the guy, he doesn't have a testimonial, but he's the first guy that Webster shoots at.
Yeah, the guy. So help me understand this scene. Is it like he drew the gun and shot it at the ground, intimidating? Or Harwood smacks his hand out of the way?
It sounds to me like he drew his gun. The first round he fires is at his
like he's
feet
aiming
or something.
at the ground?
The
intimidation shot.
Right, the intimidation shot. And then the next shot, he actually shoots Lamar.
Oh. All right, so Harwood, obviously much luckier than our subject today.
And Harwood also will enlist in Elijah White's 35th Battalion, White's Comanches.
So
all these guys cross the river and join, most of them, and he will be captured at Brandy Station.
So you can't be, like, if you're listening, you can't be mad that it was called a dirty secession town. These guys are all fighting in the secession army.
Right. The guys that I could find out information on, with the exception of one, the older Brady, all go and join. Now, they were probably predisposed, but I'm sure this incident didn't help.
Oh, it's galvanizing for sure.
Push them across. I mean, if you've been to Point of Rocks, the hills of Virginia, are
they tower
right
over
there,
right
They're
there,
right there.
And down in this same area where this incident takes place, Frederick County there was a large slave auction house.
Right.
There's a lot of down along that southern tier of Frederick County, heavy secession sympathy and interaction across the river. And all these guys go and ride with Elijah White, and like I said, the Harwood gets captured at Brandy Station.
Yep.
So that's where they end up. Now, so let's talk about Lamar. He was born on September 12th, 1842. This is a young man who's killed, Samuel Calvin Lamar. He seemed, as I said, he preferred Calvin. He was only 19 when he was killed. He was one of 6 kids of Benoni and Mary Lamar, who were well-off farm owners and one of the 794 slave-owning families in Frederick County.
Benoni?
Benoni is a first name.
It sounds like these people are Italian.
I don't know.
I just like when I'm and it's a rabbit hole for a different day. We
Right.
won't go down it, but I am fascinated by the cultural makeup of Frederick County because it gets so much of a spotlight on its German heritage, but yet you find so many
Right.
other ethnicities in these 19th and 18th century settings. So when I heard that, I was like, that sounds Italian. Like that's kind of out of place for Frederick County. So
Right.
something to look into.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so
Yep.
not about Benoni though.
So you have, and then Benoni is killed in 1858 before the war. He was struck by lightning and killed.
That'd do it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So, young Samuel doesn't have a dad by this time. Now, Samuel's sister, Annie, marries Charles Brady, one of the other guys on the handcart.
Oh.
So they're close.
They know each other.
Yeah. And she marries Charles in 1869 after the war. So they're all buddies, and now, like I said, Stephen Abbott is the guy. Well, I shouldn't have thrown another name in. There's enough names, but he's the author of the first New Hampshire's. He was in the regiment, and he's the author of the first New Hampshire's
limited regimental history.
Tiny 3-month regimental.
It's a novella.
Right,
it's
right, a novella. And he writes about this incident, and he says, "At the Pointer Rocks occurred the unfortunate conflict, the only one of its kind during the campaign, in which a young rebel was killed by a pistol shot fired by a soldier named Webster." Then he goes on to say that Webster would die during the war, and that's about it. But he calls Lamar a rebel, and if you didn't know anything about this, young rebel, you think rebel soldier, but Lamar's...
especially now, knowing what we know in the story and where a lot of these guys go up and fight and things like that.
Yeah, and, that puts a spin on it that's not accurate. He's not a rebel soldier.
Right.
He's a civilian. He's a young kid.
He's a little rebellious.
He's a little rebellious drunk kid that lipped off and got shot.
Yeah, he's a punk. He's a little badass.
Yeah.
Today, us grumpy old men would be like, we'd call him a little shit.
Right.
He's being a little shit.
So he got shot and killed for being, a little shit, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's,
I don't mean to laugh at it, but let's just be real about it. That's one thing. That's why we tell our kids today, like, mind yourself, right?
Right.
His parents, if he hadn't been struck by lightning, probably would have been like, mind yourself. Benoni would have said, mind yourself.
Right. Yeah, and so, again, it's kind of like one of these little warnings. Don't assume every primary source is 100% accurate, because he also says that the incident occurred on July 6th, which it didn't.
Yeah, no. That's a good point, Dana. Our primary sources aren't infallible, guys.
Right, so they're not. And even, the longer after the war, the more skeptical I am of them. I think that's probably everybody.
Yeah.
But, you wouldn't get what happened here at all. So to kind of give this a little kicker, like, I got this stuff in September of 2019, and I'm like, this is a little Civil War story no one knows, right?
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? This is a little bit of the Civil War nobody knows about. And the fact, I just can't get over the fact, like, First Manassas is raging away the same day, and up here along the Potomac River, there's this dirty, nasty little incident. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That no one is ever going to know about. If these things, how did these testimonials or affidavits or whatever, how did they get out? Where did they come from? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Right? Why did they get out of the regimental papers somehow? What happened? I don't know. Were there copies of these? I don't know. But
I like when these stories come to life, because I get really worn out sometimes studying military campaigns, because it really focuses only on the military campaign and not necessarily its effects on the environment around it. Like, maybe on an obvious level, when we study Passchendaele, we look at the ground and how it was affected by the artillery. But, we don't get super into, like, hey, you have along this, tiny little hamlet along the Potomac, you have out-of-town soldiers now basically patrolling the area kind of thing, and there's this authority presence that didn't exist, and it doesn't jive with it. There's a whole thing that isn't Manassas happening. Last thing on this subject, it's one of the reasons why I do enjoy the juxtaposition of the Allegheny Arsenal explosion conversation, because it happens at the same time the Sunken Road is being assaulted by federal soldiers, more or less,
Right.
Like, we are talking about, Antietam, at nauseum every September 17th.
Right.
And usually, since our first season on the show, when we really highlighted this at the end of it, every September 17th, usually about 1 o'clock, my brain for a moment or two turns to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of the fact that, elsewhere things are happening.
Right. Exactly.
Similarly, right? We focus on July 21, Manassas. We're just, Jackson's about to become legend. And we have all this stuff going on, but bang, here in Adamstown, Pointer Rocks region, there's elements of this war, like you just said, that until Dana Shove comes on the History Things podcast, we're never really going to hear about it.
No, and I wouldn't have heard about it if I didn't make so much money and just could spend lavishly.
This joke never gets old.
Lavishly and Civil War. But you're right, and the first testimonial guy says, we did this all the time. We go to Pointer Rocks, drink, take a handcart home.
Yeah.
And here, like you said, there's a group of soldiers. Things are different now.
Yep.
And what I keep thinking is, for these small group of men, the trauma they witness is the same as the guys down at Manassas are undergoing, right?
100%.
It's much more intimate, but there's a guy shot to death in front of them.
Sure.
Probably the first time many of these guys had seen anyone shot and killed, right? We're surmising here, but that's going to leave an impact on them, perhaps just as heavily as anyone that's fighting in that first Battle of Manassas.
Yeah. I think that it's one of those things that we're getting a lot better about is not pre-qualifying people's traumas or qualifying people's traumas. Like, you don't necessarily have to have served. Like, I do this at work on a daily basis because we have the 2 skirmishes right outside the fort.
Yeah,
and they're nothing fights. You get in a car today and you drive 20 minutes east of us and you're going to run into Matty B out there giving you a certified tour at Antietam Battlefield, right?
Right.
And that's the bloodiest single day in American military history.
Yeah.
There's this huge thing. It sets us on the course to being who we are, emancipation, and all that stuff, right? And I always say that what happens where I work is basically nothing. The fate of the Union is not decided. Like, we can't compare it to any of that stuff, but for the men involved in what happened here, you could not tell them that it wasn't their personal Antietam.
No.
Right.
Or their personal Gettysburg because they saw the horror.
Right.
And you can't do that like apples to apples just because they weren't at Antietam or weren't at this. So like just because these New Hampshire boys weren't at Manassas or just because these locals weren't in the army, you can't tell them they didn't experience this war firsthand.
No. Well, and you wonder what Webster was like. I mean, he how did he feel? He killed this kid. Then he's in prison.
How old is he when this happens?
20, what did I say?
26.
26, something like that.
I mean, he's a little. I was going to be like, well, he's a kid, but he's a little older than just a kid. But he's still a young guy.
I didn't write his age down separately. I could go back, but he's
young and impetuous. I'm sure
he's young enough, right?
And he's out of his own element because he's not in New Hampshire. He's never been to this part of the world.
And that's the other thing. I don't want to. These guys are from New Hampshire. It's a very alien environment they're in. They're probably on edge,
especially around Portsmouth. Wink.
They know, that.
Actually, that's the White Mountains. That's a different story.
People don't like them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, but it's okay.
I have this thing where I rabbit hole about anytime I can UFOs, and you kept. So this guy's name is Samuel Calvin Lamar, but earlier I kept getting stuck and wanting to call him Calvin Parker, and I was like, it's a different show. It's a different show. So no.
So I mean, it's this small incident, but it's traumatic. So anyway, like I start like, okay, is this kid buried around here somewhere?
Right.
So I want to give credit to my wife Heidi because. She has a lot of familiarity with Frederick County history, and she knew of a book and some papers I looked at. It said he was buried in Burkittsville.
Okay.
And I went to Burkittsville, which is this little quaint village with Civil War connections right at the foot of South Mountain.
Yeah, watch out. Don't go in the woods at night.
Don't go in the woods at night. And so...
We should not be supporting that stupid legend.
No, don't support that stupid movie and mention it ever again. Because I lived in Burkittsville when that movie came out.
Oh, did you?
I
did. So
you
had to deal with all the people.
Right. And so I'm in my yard raking leaves. Here's a rabbit trail. And this... Should I do an accent? Is that the meaning?
Did they show up on your trail cam?
No, a German radio guy was like, "Would you talk to me about the Blair Witch?" And I'm
yes.
like, "No." I'm like, "No."
You were like, "I will."
I'm like, "No, I'm not."
You got to go to
you.
Seneca's Creek.
I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to talk to you. So anyway, now you throw me off. I can't remember.
No, so we're giving
yeah.
credit to your wife Heidi, who's the real brains of this operation.
She found a small right, exactly. She found this little book, 18th Century Graveyards in Frederick County. This little out of print book. And it said that he was buried in the Otho Thomas Cemetery.
Okay.
And so we found that, and the Otho Thomas Cemetery is just...
Do you want to reveal this publicly? Are we going to have to... Do you want a top secret beep it?
I will tell you this. I'll say this about it. It's an abandoned graveyard. And we found it, and we went there. And we walked in... It's
regionally close to the story.
Regionally close to the story. And I will say one thing, and it's not going to give the location away that much, but... We walked into this cemetery, and it's in a little clump of trees, basically surrounded by farm fields, okay? And it was this gorgeous October day, those super blue skies you get in the fall.
Oh, yeah.
Sunny. The leaves hadn't all dropped yet, so there's color and everything. It's just amazing. And we drove down this road, and I saw a gravestone. I'm like, oh my God, there it is. And we got out, we walked in, and it was like stepping into a Gothic horror movie set. Literally.
Oh, neat.
It's this 18th century graveyard that's abandoned. It's been abandoned a long time. It's overgrown with brambles and bushes. It was sunny outside. It was dark in there under the trees.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay. I tripped in a sunken... I didn't fall, but I tripped in a sunken grave.
Oh,
so many of them are sunken. The headstones all over the place, toppled and whatever. 18th century headstones with elaborate carving. I was like, oh my God.
I love the beauty of the old carvings.
It was unbelievable. And Otho Thomas was a prominent early person down there. So it must have been his,
You mentioned a Thomas in our story. One of the characters that you mentioned has the last name Thomas.
He has a first name, Thomas Harwood.
No, you mentioned Joseph Thomas. You mentioned a Thomas. Somebody was a farmer. And my first thought when you mentioned it was, I wonder if they're related to the Thomases up in Monocacy, but
I don't know.
Maybe my brain's just doing the thing it does for wires that don't need to touch are touching.
Maybe they're touching.
That happens.
So we go in and we look, and I'm like, I mean, there's these amazing graves, and I got one, like here's what you see, if I can find it here. Okay, here's one in memory of Mary Thomas, wife of Edward Thomas, who was born 17th September, speaking of September 17th, 1759, died 22nd November 1793, age 34. Why should we mourn departed friends or shake at death's alarms, is this inscription on this stone, right? And I'm just like, whoa. We don't find any Samuel Calvin Lamar. And we're leaving, and my wife, the hero, the heart of the story, says, wait a minute, what about that gravestone over there on the edge? And I hadn't seen it.
Right.
And I went over, and it was a comparatively new-looking stone compared to some of the other ones. And I went around to the front side, and it says Samuel Calvin Lamar, his birth date, and July 21st, 1861.
That's awesome.
Above and below a weeping willow.
What did that feel like for you? Just to see it.
I was staggered.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
Like, there you are, bud.
This kid was killed. The whole story. This kid was killed, was put here because a Union soldier shot him on a railroad handcart.
In a kind of macabre way, it's neat that because a lot of us have the experience of looking at a lot of these stones and knowing the name because it's there, knowing the dates, but it's like, what's the story?
And
you know the story.
I was staggered. And it was like we all, Melissa Wynn, my director of photography, was with me as well.
Yes.
You know Melissa,
yes,
right?
Yes, we're about to have Melissa on the show. By the time
that's right, you're right.
By the time this comes out, you guys won't have heard that episode yet, but we're having Melissa up here. We're very excited.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that. So, but she's an incredible person.
Right. She's got great stories. And so we're standing there, and we're just silent. And I'm like, oh, my God. And I'm just like, and it's like there's cars zipping by. You have no clue what's going on.
But for you in this world, this is a huge moment.
And I'm not kidding you, I hear a train whistle. And I realize the tracks on which he was shot are within earshot of where his grave is. That's that spur I was talking about.
That's how close
That's how close it is.
Oh, man.
You could hear trains that still use that spur go by.
They're
new tracks, but they're still on the same location the Civil War tracks were.
I got some kind of neat chills thinking about the prospect of you having this moment, like seeing him, his story, and then it's like, then you hear the train whistle, and you're like, all those pieces locking, you're like, I'm standing in the story. Like, it's
I know.
right around
I just
me.
was like, and I'm like, I know why you're here, and I just.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I just was like. So that's why when I found the soldiers, I was so excited to find another one. And that's why I wrote this up. And we did Civil War Times, we do a First Monday broadcast.
Yes, big fans.
We try to hew to that as much as we can. Sometimes we can't make it. We get busy. But we did a First Monday there. And I want to go back and do it again because I didn't have the soldiers' deposition at the time.
Yeah.
But I did a First Mondays there. And I've gone back several times to just check on the grave because I worry about the whole place.
That's why it was like when you started to mention it, I was like, maybe we back off that because while people might have good intentions and are curious, they might not be aware that they bring damage.
Well, somebody found it because I went back and there were Confederate flags stuck in the ground next to his gravestone.
Even though he wasn't a...
And you know what? I know people are going to get mad.
Who cares?
I know you're going to get mad. I took the flags down. Not because they were Confederate flags, but because the kid was a civilian. He wasn't a Confederate soldier.
Right. Put up the Frederick County flag.
Or
there you go.
Even if he had like an American flag and a Confederate flag or something, but I'm like,
We shouldn't celebrate him as as a soldier in the war of the slaveholders' rebellion because he was a civilian.
Here's why I'm doing this. We don't know that he would have enlisted in the Confederate Army. We don't know.
Right. Elder Brady went to Baltimore and rode trains.
We don't know. He probably would have, but we don't know. Okay?
Right.
And also, what gets me about this is he was just a civilian kid who was shot and murdered by a Union soldier, right?
Yeah.
And if you stick that Confederate flag on it, somehow it changes the tone of it. Like, it
makes it more of war and less of murder.
Less of
right.
Yes.
It's a murder.
Right.
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
a good way to
I
phrase
don't
it.
and I still I didn't destroy the flags. I still have them at home. But I don't ever do stuff like that. But maybe this was a little bit, I lost my historian's objectivity and became too personal about it. But I said, no, he deserves something. The cemetery needs cleaned up, but I don't think a Confederate flag is right for this kid.
He also deserves to have the story told correctly.
If
he's not a
he
soldier.
had been a member of White's cavalry, home on leave, and he was shot in the same circumstances by a Union soldier,
sure,
I would have left those flags there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I would have said,
1,000,000%.
okay, I'm not going to mess with this. I get it. He was a Confederate soldier. I'm going to leave him here. But I took him down, and
it also robs him of the innocence of his
It robs
childhood
him
at
of
19 because he's
and-
not a soldier.
and
he's
if
not
someone
in the war.
and if someone comes unbeknownst to that cemetery and they see those flags, they're like, this kid was a Confederate soldier.
And he wasn't.
And he
It's
wasn't.
super inaccurate.
And the
they didn't
danger
tell
of
the
that is-
truth. They didn't tell the truth in the regimental history by calling him a rebel.
Right.
Or
And these flags don't tell the truth either. So
or
that's
we-
why I took him down.
Right, the regimental history. So I was thinking about that. Like, they might have used the word rebel because they understood what it was going to do, but it's
Right.
also accurate.
Right.
Like, he was just a rebellious kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they capital R that rebel. So that
Oh, so no. They
anybody
knew,
reading that regimental is going to think rebel soldier, right? You know what I mean? They're not going to think like,
And the smart things that
I'm a
were being-
rebel Dottie kind of
Yeah.
rebel.
The
you know?
the smart things that were probably coming out of. I mean, this is why I like the art of conversational history because we can use critical thinking
Right.
and speculate. But let's be clear, we are speculating. Like some of the smart things being said from Calvin to the soldier might have mirrored the tones of the local sentiments. Like you are a Yankee and they are not. We will never know, but. That's why I'm cool with the flags removal in this situation because what we do know is that he was a local kid.
Right.
And he had his life taken
Right.
over something as simple as just being a smartass.
Right.
Right.
And look, I'm a smartass. I have been sharp, and in my life, I have probably walked away from situations that might have gone south.
Right.
Might have been my own Samuel Lamar. Who knows? But I'll tell you that nobody should lose their life just for being able to talk better than the person. Listen, if you lose a talking match, you lost it.
Exactly. And his mother's name was Mary. And you think about
Shout out Indian fans. Guardian fans.
the fact that, she's suffering as much trauma as someone who loses a soldier in that war, right? She's burying she's already lost her husband. Now she's burying one of her kids.
100%.
Her 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Was his father nearby? In that cemetery?
That's a really good question. I did not see his father there.
Okay. I was just curious.
I was so,
Sure, no,
that's
absolutely.
a good point. And next time I'm down there, I'll take a look and see if I didn't notice any other Lamars there. Put it
Okay.
that way. That's like, as I said to you guys, Walt Whitman famously said, "The real war will never get in the books."
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I kind of feel in this little sliver, I helped get a little of that real war in the books because this is one of the gajillions of things that happened that makes this war so tragic
Yep.
and horrible for our country, and not for the fact that I'm incredibly wealthy and chanced upon these testimonials. You know what I mean? Was able to put this thing together. And like, whoa, oh my God, this is insane. This little incident's terrible.
It's a perfect testament, though, to the fact that the American Civil War was a series of infinite tragedies just stacked up on each other for four, not even just the 4 isolated years of the war, but as we started, right, we start things in the 30s.
Right.
Like, this is, and even into the modern day, we'll leave that subject right there, but like, this is just a series of infinite tragedies, and this is one of them. I am so grateful that you keyed in on the keywords local to you and started this whole project for you and for being able to bring it to us a few years later. I'm also glad we got it a few years later because we have a soldier's account in the story.
Right. And I exactly. And I would love to.
Doesn't change my vibe, but it provides some clarity.
No, it's good to have both sides, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, these may not be the only ones that were taken down. These are just the only ones that I've come across, right? But they still are, still tell a good enough amount of the story. And I also, I'd love to lead a tour sometime if I thought it was okay to his grave and kind of give a talk, show some slides.
Well, let's look into that because we might be able to help you do that.
And say, hey, let's get a van. Whoever goes on his tour, we'll go down there and we could see where his resting place is.
Yeah, let's do a little top secret collaboration over the winter. Let's make it happen.
I want to really draw attention to this cemetery because it needs safeguarding.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some crazy stones in there in addition to this incredible story of this kid. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. So if you're out there and you have legitimate background in, restoring cemeteries, cleaning historic gravestones, things like that, send us a message. Again, historythingspodcast@gmail.com. Let's just start a conversation. But, who knows? Maybe we put together a small little task force.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We go out there and clean it up, without...
Task Force Lamar.
Yeah, Task Force Lamar. We go out there and we do the work without, bringing a lot of attention to it. But once it's nice and clean...
No, I want the attention. Come
watch.
It's like the people... a big flag, and everything.
That's like the people that film themselves doing good deeds. Like, here's the sandwich, homeless person. Just do the work.
Right. I want guys with AKs getting the perimeter around us so we could work safely.
Well, we go to Virginia, we could work that out.
yeah.
Pretty quickly.
But no, I mean, it's we have a communal friend in Travis Shaw.
Yes.
He knows of this place, and I think he was telling me there is some place you can go about it, but I can't remember. I need to touch base back with him. So.
When we talked about that Historians on Tap that's going to be coming out where you can listen to Matt talk about the Vincentier family. You can also listen to Travis Shaw in that episode.
Yeah.
Because he was the one of the two hosts for the night, him and Anne-Marie Kirlissen. And Travis basically gave us probably the most morbid murder story I have ever.
No.
Are you familiar with the Newey murders in Frederick County? All right. When you reach out to Travis, ask him, be like, hey, I was hanging out with the History Things boys, and they told us that you really brought the scene down.
Wow. Well, and you told stories as well that night. So.
I mean, I did. So I talk about a little bit about Fort Frederick and the Civil War, but they're not dramatic. They're cool stories.
Yeah.
But Travis really, like you, connected with the local story. I guess are there only murders that happen in Frederick County? Because his is a murder, yours is a murder. But yeah, when you ask him about the Newey murders and bring some Kleenex because you're going to cry.
Oh, wow.
It's sad and it's gruesome. It's bad.
Wow.
It's bad.
But yeah,
you were talking about Engelbrecht?
Yes. And I think he actually is involved in that story too somehow.
Travis is a big Engelbrecht fanboy.
Yeah, no.
Mm-hmm. So if you ever want to do a show about him, maybe,
so he's our guy?
Travis might be your guy.
It sounds like he is our guy.
I
feel like Travis likes punk music.
I think
punk rock.
I do too, and I think he does too.
Yes,
yeah. Travis thinks he's pretty cool.
He's got sick flow. As a guy who is follically challenged on the top of the head here, I mean, he's got a sick flow.
Oh yeah,
and he wears Chuck Taylor sometimes, so he looks like he likes punk rock.
He thinks he's pretty cool.
Right. So he's probably not though. Love you, Travis. So all right, so you reach out to him about the Newey murders. We will get him on for Jason Engelbrecht.
Yeah.
Any more on the story of Samuel Lamar, or are we leaving it at we will have to come back and talk about the future restoration of the cemetery?
Well, yeah, and it's just I think for the listeners, if I've stumbled around this one story, how many other stories similar, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll never know.
Oh yeah.
Right? We'll never know. We'll never know.
Well,
we'll never know.
We need each other's help in this. The amateur out there has just as important of a role as the professional in this world. Like, you have access to the same stuff for the most part, that we all have access to. So if you're working on a case, keep working it. Follow the leads, pull at all the threads, and if you come up with something and you're looking for help, we can help you. Right. All of us. You can reach out to all of us. We'll talk about where we can get in touch in a minute here. But if you're also looking for an opportunity to tell the story, reach out again. We'd love to put you on. The whole goal with, I think, what we're all doing whether it's, History Net, Civil War Times, or us here at the shows. We're just trying to get as much of this out there for you to digest and learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's one of these things, too, because people are like, what else can you write about the Civil War? It's all been written. I'm like, well, I don't think so.
Not even
I don't
close.
think so, because this is a new little...
The campaign studies might have been written, but the war hasn't been fully covered
And
yet.
again, you can take off, and this tells you about a divided border state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could tell you a lot of different things, this story like this. It could tell you about how veterans sort of twist the memory of stuff, whether it's intentional or not intentional.
Time warps. All right, Dana, before we get out of here, a couple things. This episode, obviously, out November 1st. What can we look forward to from you from now to about the end of the year, for History Net, for Civil War Times? Anything coming up, big and special?
Well, I think, we're working on... We got to really...
Are you guys doing Fredericksburg coverage this year?
We're going to try to go down to Fredericksburg for the anniversary, yeah.
All right, cool.
We, I don't really know what we're doing in November for First Mondays. We'll figure out something. But, we just been working on the magazine, and we're producing a new series of videos called Civil War Stuff on My Desk, which...
I love that. What's on my desk?
What's on my desk?
Big fan.
And we're trying, I'll tell you what, no one cares this much about publishing, but publishing now is not just the printed page, right?
Sure.
The magazine Civil War Times is the printed page, but it's also video, it's also Facebook. And we have to do that. It's a website, a HistoryNet website, which will take you to the Civil War Times page. And, we're trying to branch out on all platforms. So one of the things I'm doing with American History Magazine is moving it in that direction. So look for our videos, and please consider subscribing, because that's still the revenue engine, really.
Sure.
And the crazy thing is, we still have a lot of subscribers. To get the magazine.
Print is not dead.
Print isn't dead.
Print is not dead.
Print is dead. No,
all right.
it's not.
What's the website?
HistoryNet.com.
What's the social media?
Civil War Times. Just if you go on Facebook, just go to Civil War Times, and you'll find our Facebook page, and you'll find our videos there, and the Civil War Stuff on My Desk is there, and the Fourth Texas videos. Everyone got upset for the one question I asked. And
we're obligated. Let's touch on that for just one more second, because we were talking about this in pre-production. We are obligated to ask these questions. If you're mad that the Civil War Times magazine is asking this question, or if you're mad that the History Things podcast is humbly asking this question, think about what our obligation is. We are supposed to bring this stuff to the forefront to talk about it. So if you, as we said it as a joke, but go look it up. Watch the conversation Dana has with, was it Tyler?
Tyler Gregg.
Watch the conversation he has, and try not to, if you find yourself immediately knee-jerking that this is crap, try to ask yourself why.
If I'm not asking that question, I'm not doing my job as an objective historian.
That's what I mean.
And what I tell to people, I'm not here to vilify the Confederacy, but I'm not here to celebrate it either. I'm here to try to understand it. And this is part of the background.
Yep.
And we got to be able to reach a place where we can dispassionately talk about the fact that slavery is part of the Confederate cause and the interactions of Confederate soldiers with the enslaved in any form. It doesn't take away from the fact that Barksdale's brigade kicked ass at Gettysburg.
Nope.
And if I had Confederate ancestors, and the way I look at it, they're products of their time. If I'm a 20-year-old kid in North Carolina, they had... Let's just take it in Georgia, which is a little more...
Yeah, I was going to say, you picked like one of the weird unionist Confederate states.
But if I'm a 20-year-old kid and I'm living in Atlanta, Georgia, and this war breaks out, it's almost guaranteed I'm going to go to war with the local Confederate company. Because I'm a product of my time, and that's what everybody's doing, and that's what I was raised to believe.
You come in confusing. You're like, if you're a young kid from Watertown, Virginia, it's like, wait,
yeah.
That's a union town.
Right.
Don't do that.
Right, yeah. So I was like, that's why I changed from North Carolina.
We're Georgians. In this scenario, we're Georgians.
Right. Or Tennessee, or if you're not in East Tennessee, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? If you're from a Confederate area, so to speak, all of us in this room are if we were born at that time, you're going to go in the Raccoon Roughs or Jeff Davis rifles or whatever.
I tell people all the time, I'm from Rockville, Maryland. The majority of the sons of Rockville crossed the river and enlisted in Virginia. With hindsight, I know exactly where I'd serve. I'm a Union guy.
Right.
Like, I make no bones about this.
Right.
But the education I would have had, things like that, I probably would have gone across the river because that's what my boys would have done.
Right.
And I would go with the boys.
But we have to be able to talk about it. And Living History is a place to talk about it.
It 100% is. Dana, it is always a pleasure having you
man.
on the show. You were doing the fine works, whether it's,
you guys, I love coming here because
brother.
it just feels like a conversation. You know what I mean?
Well, this
we
was
try.
fun.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to come back on and tell one of these stories, any story you want, you are more than welcome to come here and share it with us. We're very grateful. So before we get out of here, the History Things podcast, like the Civil War Times and HistoryNet, is found on all social media just by searching for the History Things podcast. You can download all of our episodes on all major podcast apps. And for those of you who have been trucking along with us since season 1 or just joining us now but are looking for ways to help us out, again, we really appreciate 5-star ratings and reviews on all things here. Dana has given us the signal for one more thing.
I'm really sorry, but I do, if
It'll
you don't
cost
mind.
you, bud. It'll cost $10.
The essay I wrote about
Yeah.
this incident is going to be included. I'm really excited about this in a book that's coming out in early 2023.
You should have absolutely mentioned this.
And
This is important.
The
Push.
the book is titled "Final Resting Places: Reflections on the Meaning of Civil War Graves."
Oh, right on.
It's published by the University of Georgia Press, and it's a collection of essays. Some leading Civil War historians are in there, and then dopes like me as well. So I'm really excited to have this story in there because it's
That's serious, bud. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's going to get this story in the historiography of the Civil War.
That's
you know what I
awesome.
mean?
One day we'll come back and because I think what we also just were touching on was how complicated loyalties were in the South. Like we said North Carolina, well, let's pick a more Confederate state, and then you made the joke about Tennessee. It's like, I think that's a fascinating subject in and of itself, is like how not actually unified in secession the Southern states were.
Right.
I mean, they might
Not
have
even
seceded, but what is the stat? All Southern states except for South
Carolina
provide Union regiments to the war.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing, but everywhere you turn is a rabbit hole you could fall into.
It's like at least another corps, if not another, maybe even more than that.
Wait a minute, but the Civil War's been written about. Everything's been covered, guys.
I know.
This is a perfect example of why that is.
And this
absolute
was
malarkey.
the last episode related to the Civil War because it's all done now. And so we're not going to talk. We can't talk about it anymore.
That's right.
Well,
No
and
more
that's why we're the
podcasts.
history things.
Yeah,
That's right. So now we'll go to the First World War and end that
right,
one. So,
right.
Dana, you're the man. So again, 5-star ratings, positive reviews really help us out. Share it with a history lover, or share it with somebody that doesn't know they're about to become a history lover. Somebody that just likes to hear good stories. You don't necessarily have to pay attention to the fact that it's a historical subject. If we removed all the date and times from this story,
Right.
it's fascinating nonetheless.
Right.
Same
And
thing
it's
with
just murder.
That it's just murder.
It's just
People
murder,
love true
right,
crime.
right, yeah.
If you love true crime, you're definitely
Right.
going to want to get
Right.
into the Newey story that Travis tells when we put that out around Black Friday. So we love you guys. The History Things podcast is basically alive and well because of your amazing support. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Today, for our co-host, co-host, you're on the show. It feels so natural, Dana. For our guest today, Dana Shove, managing editor in print of HistoryNet, not the History Things podcast. You want a job? You want to work here?
Not that you
I don't have enough
already.
to do.
I know.
Yeah, right.
Editor of Civil War Times magazine. For my co-host with the most, Maddie B. Borders.
Whoa.
I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire, saying we love you. We will catch you all later.
See y'all.
You've been listening to the History Things podcast. Follow the guys on Facebook and Instagram at the History Things podcast for all the latest news and exclusives. Make sure to also follow Pat and Matt on their social medias at History Things with Pat and at Matt Borders Books. Have a question, comment, or compliment for the show? Send us an email at historythingspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show.